Hello Fezwearers, this is the Slick Wine TARDIS extension, and today I'm working with the creator to do the most in-depth review of this TARDIS. But before that, I want to show you the first ever Slick Wine extension because it's really interesting to see how it evolved into the current one. Let's quickly talk about Slick Wine's first ever TARDIS add-on. To be honest, the exterior of this looks a bit like a custard cream with like this really weird red lamp on top. And the interior is very unfinished and unrefined. I mean, just look at this console. And there's all these corridors that lead to just nowhere. And then there's this one random room with this Minecraft looking bed. And you can't forget these very good looking gaps in the walls. But obviously this was just a fun project that the creator did. It wasn't serious or anything. Which explains a lot, like how there's actually no controls on this console. It's manual flight only. Also there's this hole in this roof that shows like space and stars and things. It is also in the current TARDIS and it's done in a much better way. The current Slick Wine TARDIS was actually made on Roblox originally on a game called Doctor Who TARDIS Flight Classic, which you may have heard of, and this is what it looked like in that game originally. Then with the help of another creator called Molder, who I've actually done a video with before, they made a base model for this TARDIS in Minecraft and then made it in Gmod. So let's start to look at the current version. Just to clarify, Slick Wine did make a couple other TARDISes before this one, and some of them you'll probably recognise. But I want to go over the current extension because it's one of my all-time favourites and well, it's kind of the topic of the video. This exterior is based on the creator's actual in real life wardrobe. There are 4 skins on each of these. There's this grey one which you've probably seen, this white one which is the real life version, this oak wood looking one, and then this white one with a 9 which is referencing the Inside Number 9 show. What this mirror shows depends on what map you're on. I'm currently on New Worlds, so this is what it looks like on this map, and for reference this is what it looks like on Construct. I love how many ledges and bumps and things there are on this. It really gives it a nice 3-dimensional feel. And as you probably saw earlier, there are 3 different interiors. So let's talk about all of them now. This is the old version, not to be confused with the old extensions which I looked at just now. This has very recently been taken off of the add-on, but I thought I would show you it anyway. This one is a definite improvement to the ones before this one, although I do probably prefer the next 2 versions we're going to look at. This console was actually used in the Twice Upon a Time and Roof Doctor TARDISes, because as I mentioned earlier, Molder worked on this TARDIS with Slick Wine and Molder made those TARDISes, so it only makes sense. Especially with this little door from an adventure in time and space. For something that barely anyone knows about, is really quite detailed. And obviously you can access all the skins that are seen in those ones in this one. Not that any of them really fit, but it's just cool to have them. And you can also access this skin in those TARDISes. If you look off the edge here, you'll see, well, nothing. I'll talk about this more and the effect it gives in the next variant, however, because it's more apparent there. And this beam kind of acts as the rotor as it just goes through the console and the whole TARDIS itself. So it comes up here to the sky looking bit. And it's meant to be another sun up here, but in the current version there's a glitch where it doesn't appear. The sky itself looks really cool in all 3 of these variants, and it kind of looks like a window into space and time itself, unless of course you just use V-clip and just look at the edge. Something I realised literally yesterday is that the company on this box and this cup is the same company from Wally, which is quite a cool Easter egg. These random books and boxes and furniture and things are really cool and help make the place feel more lived in and used, which helps add to this atmosphere and realism of this TARDIS. Speaking of atmosphere, this is the sun with dark lighting version, and it's also the main version. The lighting has very recently been updated and it's a definite improvement. As I briefly mentioned earlier, when you look off here you see literally nothing, but in this version it really looks like an empty void, and for some reason I can just imagine something jumping out of this pitch black just because of how everything else has subtle lighting, but down there is literally nothing. I'm recording this the day after the previous clip and the sun has actually been re-added. It has all this stuff coming off it that I can only describe as like flakes of light, and they look really cool. And the sun has multiple layers in it and then it just fades out into nothingness. And these flakes have also been added to the sun down here. But I can't review this TARDIS without talking about the new lighting design. As you can probably tell, the difference between this version and the previous one is insane. There's this orange light radiating off the beam in the middle, and because it isn't from like a traditional light like over there, when the power is off you can still see this glow around it. And I love how it looks with the power off, it really brings attention to the console. And because there's this beam, there's no proper rotor to show when the TARDIS is in flight or in the vortex. So there isn't actually any visual way to see whether you're in flight or not when you're in the interior. Is what I would say if there wasn't these really cool light patterns that came down when you were in flight. It's really satisfying how they come down in a sequence. It's just a cool little way to compensate for not having a rotor. And I think it works really well, especially with the new lighting system. And this lighting pattern is actually in all 3 of these variants, but there is actually a bit of a difference with this system in the next variant, so let's go look at that now. As you can probably tell, the big difference in this variant is that the beam has been replaced with a normal rotor. This is the short rotor version, and it uses the rotor from the previously mentioned moulded TARDISes. When it's paired with the lighting animation, it's very obvious when the TARDIS is in flight. And can I mention how satisfying the animation on this rotor is? It's really smooth and I love it. And because there is no more beam, that orange glow isn't here anymore. This makes the whole TARDIS overall a lot more darker than the other version. Not to say that's a bad thing, actually I quite like it. It gives a much more moody atmosphere, and without the orange you can really see how the lights reflect off the individual levers and controls and things, and I just can't believe how detailed these add-ons are getting now, especially when compared to the old legacy TARDISes. Speaking of them, I'm thinking of doing a video where I talk about the history of the TARDISes in Gmod. If that is something you'd be interested in, subscribe to not miss that video. And something I didn't mention in the previous variant is that in both of these TARDISes there's this multi-level design. On every one of these floors there are these doors on each end, and also on the ground floor. I assume these would be entrances to like a lift to go up and down on different floors. Obviously they're not functional, they're just for looks, but I like the idea anyway. And there's this hole in the center of each floor, which is where the beam would have gone. And because there is no beam, there's just this random hole throughout the levels. Not that it's very easy to see without the beam anyway. Now that we've talked about 2 variants plus the old version and the very old versions, I want to talk about which one is my favourite. The main one on the current extension is my favourite, which is probably obvious. I love the center beam that goes through all of the TARDIS, and this brilliantly made sun that has just been updated. It is just perfect, and I can confidently say that this extension is the best fan-made TARDIS in Gmod, at least in my opinion. But with that said, if you haven't seen my review of the 13th Doctor TARDIS that is on screen now, I strongly suggest that you watch it. And a big thanks to Slick Wine for giving me the first extensions, and if you made it this far into the video, follow me on Twitter for more channel updates.